welcome to, as Jenny said, day 2 of the RINGO learning. We're very excited to this session, which is called Accountability and Risk. Whose risk is it anyway? I'm really looking forward to this session. And we've got great speakers. And can I now ask you to actually unmute yourself, turn on your microphone, and say good morning or hello in your mother tongue. It's going to be a weird moment of everyone talking over each other.
Morning.
So,
Headed up by a woman.
Good morning.
Morgen.
Wie
Morgen.
hello. Guten Morgen.
Morning.
So, Julia, please take. No, I got muted as well. Please take 3 deep breaths to fully arrive here and now, and then I'm going to hand over to Nancy.
Thank you, David, for helping us settle in. And welcome, everybody, to day 2 of the RINGO Festival. Those who were able to join us yesterday sessions, or one of them or 2 of them, thank you for coming back. And if it's your first time joining the sessions today, you are welcome. So today we are going to talk about accountability and risks. And it had a lot yesterday. For those who were able to join, can confirm. And if you weren't able to join, don't worry, there's still more for us to talk about today. And yesterday in our conversation, we were saying that we are currently in a broken system. The world that we are in now, the system is really broken. And then amidst that, we are also facing a lot of threats, and we share in solidarity with everybody that is struggling, or the organization is struggling now with the new changes from the USAID work. And we all agreed and we all discussed that now is the time for us to come together, for us to pull together, for us to connect together in solidarity. So this is not the time for us to be talking about those who are in the majority world, those who are in the minority world. We have to work together. We also talked about how the role of our board and leadership is very crucial in this material moment, and how we really need the right resourcing, not just funding, but all kinds of resources to sustain the work that we are doing. So this morning, we want to begin the conversation, like I said early on, about accountability and risks. And then we want to have a discussion on the key issues around these 2 critical topics in this system that is currently chaotic as it is, but then ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to shift the power when we're talking about accountability and risks? So we'll be discussing that, and we are fortunate to have with us 2 wonderful speakers to share their practical experiences. And we realize that, when we talk about accountability, when we talk about risks, there are so many ways that each of us understand it when we're looking at shifting the power. It could mean that we want to support mutual accountability mechanisms, where funders, national organizations, and INGOs all work together to ensure that each of us are accountable to each other in solidarity. It's also about how do we bring in national level leadership or elements when we are looking at accountability. It could also mean how do we actually share risks. And yesterday there was something about we shouldn't be talking about risk aversion, we should be talking about risk participation. But what does it really mean? How is it happening in the sector that we are in? So I have with me here 2 wonderful speakers that will be sharing examples, practical examples of what they are doing when it comes to risks. And it's also around the conversations that we are having, they are leading on and having around risks, what they are doing when it comes to ensuring that there's mutual accountability in practice. And they'll be sharing these practical examples with us. And we would like you also join the conversation by sharing with us what you are doing, what are the real things that are happening in the chat and engage in the conversation so that collectively, in solidarity, we all come together, pull together, and discuss how we handle risks and accountability in this broken, chaotic system that is even under threat. So I would like to use the opportunity to welcome our speaker, Michael Vincent Mekando. So Michael, which I'll be calling him Mike, he is a development professional, and his work he dedicated towards shifting power to communities, and also communities who are mostly at the frontiers of disaster work. He has 15 years experience in disaster risk reduction, and then he leads the Voice and Insights Lab at the Center for Disaster Preparedness, where he works to ensure that local voices drive decision making. So Mike, say hello to everyone and thank you for joining the conversation today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike from CDP Foundation based in the Philippines. Glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And with me here too is Alex Teman from Christian Aid. So Alex is the Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning Manager at Christian Aid. She has been actively involved in the journey of Christian Aid on the Pledge for Change initiative. And then she also is the secondment on pledge signatories since 2024, where his work is focusing on the Pledge for Change accountability and learning mechanism initiative. So we are happy to have you here with us, Alex, and if you can say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Alex here. Yeah, like Nancy says, from Christian Aid, and very happy to be here.
Great. And I think in the course of the conversation, we have other colleagues from the pledge with us here, Kate Moga, that we will bring her in the course of the discussion, and also our other colleagues from Adesso. So let me start with you, Alex, before I come to Michael. For you to share with us your experience at Christian Aid. So Christian Aid has been one of the organizations that is leading the example of mutual accountability or multiple accountability. So can you share the journey with us from how it started connecting to the Pledge for Change and what you are doing now at Pledge for Change with regards to the PALM initiative that you are leading on? And maybe you can also use that opportunity to let us know all the sides. So what are the downsides, getting involved and testing this initiative? Are there resistance that you've experienced in the journey? And what are some of the things that now is possible because of your interconnection with the Pledge for Change and the PALM framework? So over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nancy. And thank you for this opportunity to share some of these thoughts of what it's been like from a Christian Aid perspective to embark on this journey of change. Yeah, it's really a journey with peers. And I think it's very apt that this session is focused on mutual accountability, which I think is also where we in Christian Aid have experienced the benefit of walking this journey together with others. So Christian Aid, you may or may not know us. We are celebrating our 80th birthday this year. So for 8 decades now, we've been dedicated to combating poverty and responding to humanitarian need. And from the start, actually, our preferred way of working has always been through partnership with local actors. Our partnership approach has involved not only funding projects conceived and designed by local actors, but we have also supported these partners in project implementation. This strategy is rooted in our recognition of the crucial role of contextual knowledge, understanding, in achieving these positive outcomes that we're looking for, as well as our belief in the importance of a robust civil society as key to delivering development and in fact also humanitarian aid. So the reality, though, is that in recent years, we, as well as other international NGOs, have faced criticism from Global South actors for the way we work concentrates power and resources at the expense of local civil society. And I think we've been rightly called out for perpetuating colonial patterns of privilege and exclusion, and for failing to address issues of legitimacy and accountability in particular. Despite our commitment to partnership-based programming, which is designed to enable these equitable partnerships, I think we, along with our peers, are not quite there yet. So, well, I'll tell you how that now pans out in terms of our Pledge for Change journey. In 2021, Christian Aid became part of the Pledge for Change initiative, which in fact was launched by Odesso. And this initiative brought together a small group of international NGOs to discuss how they could transform their roles in the aid sector, aiming for greater legitimacy, purpose, and accountability. And then there's a period between 2021 and 2024 where Pledge for Change facilitated extensive discussions, particularly on mutual accountability, believing that more will be achieved in terms of progress if peer organizations travel on that journey together, to some extent holding each other to account to make sure that progress is being made. But in addition, there's another aspect to this mutual accountability, which I really want to highlight as well, which is that a lot of it was designed and wants to be Southern led. So there's the part which I call belly gazing, which is, INGOs looking at themselves and saying, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then there's this being held accountable by Southern actors, for whom, in fact, who we are is very important. And they have their own perception and perspective on where the system is working and where it isn't, and what they want to see change. So that is part of the Pledge for Change journey, whereby Pledge for Change then invited Southern-based supporters, their signatories and supporters. Signatories are INGOs and supporters are others who are supporting the journey. Many of them are Southern-based, and the Southern-based supporters were invited to be very actively involved in the decision-making and design of metrics that were adopted by Pledge for Change to measure the type of change that the INGO signatories would be committing to in order to achieve the type of change that Pledge for Change is looking for. And just to say that type of change, in essence, there are 3 pledges. We call them equitable partnerships, so it's about equitable partnerships. There's authentic storytelling, so it's about how we communicate that collaborative journey of development. And then influencing wider change, which is about advocacy towards change in the aid sector at large, actually. So those 3 pledges, and we kind of make a journey, and we have pledges, we have metrics towards them, and those metrics have been very much co-designed with the Southern based supporters. So that's where we're at in terms of that collectivity. Let me now maybe just go over and explain a little bit about what Pledge for Change has developed in order to facilitate that process of mutual accountability. And we have called it the PAM. The PAM stands for, of course, Pledge for Change, Accountability and Learning Mechanism. And I think Sparkle is going to put, are you going to put the link into the chat? Those of you who like visuals, there's a case study in the chat which starts off with a little visual of what the PAM actually entails. So I'm going to take you through it, but you can also look at it while I'm speaking. So the PAM is designed with different aspects of accountability. I'll start with INGO self-reporting and reflection. There's a lot of this. Again, I said belly gazing, but it is important. Self-reporting is very important, that you are very honest with yourself, where you're at and where you want to go. And that includes the publication of an annual report. So all signatories publish an annual report. There is also a very interesting other part called a discourse analysis, and I'll come back to that one. Then there's a second kind of area of accountability mechanisms, and that's around partner and local feedback. So that includes a partner survey And in fact, dear Nancy is involved in that, and I've been working with her on designing, implementing more than designing, to be very fair. That partner survey is ongoing as we speak. Then there is a third part to the to the PAM, and that is the Southern-led assessments. As I said, Southern-led accountability is really important, and we have particularly two really interesting aspects to that. One being an expert review panel to look at the communications that INGOs put out. As I said, there's a pledge on authentic storytelling, and that this really relates to that, where Southern experts look at communications and see if they meet certain ethical, equitable, and accountability standards. And then there's also a Southern-led global advisory panel, and that pulls together all the information that we're gathering about how INGOs are doing in terms of the partner survey, in terms of the annual report, in terms of the discourse analysis, and in terms of what the expert review panel has found. So all these things I've mentioned, the global advisory panel pulls that together and then has a conversation with the signatories and says, okay, this is what we're seeing, what's your plan, what's your process? So that's kind of how the PAM works. You can see that we've really been keen on this mutual accountability that we're talking about today is about not only, committing ourselves to the journey, but also doing so with others and being open about it. So this year was the first year that the signatories submitted an annual report. So we took from 2021, but now in 2024, there was the first year of annual reporting, and everybody submitted a report. And it has been an interesting journey. As part of the pledge meal, the working group, the meal working group in Pledge for Change, we've kind of tried to facilitate that. So I've been following that process quite closely. And I've noted some challenges, or as Nancy says, resistances. But it's really interesting to see the process, and I feel very positive about it overall. I might start with a few, let's say, wins, some upsides. For example, the whole process of being mutually accountable is so linked to the fact that in Pledge for Change, strong leadership investment has really led to, in each of the organizations, the reporting process has been given priority. And in Christian Aid in particular, this has ensured that the whole organization, not just the international facing part, has gotten involved, like with authentic storytelling and with the advocacy work. All of that has really, and everybody in the organization is so aware of the commitments that Christian Aid has made towards localization, towards locally led programming, towards decolonization. So the process of reporting has really brought up awareness. I guess I'll be honest and say that for Christian Aid, we've always been working in a partnership-based organization, and that has also been a nice thing. I feel perhaps that we've been able to bring something to the conversation because we have just a little bit more kind of backstory in terms of working with local actors, and it feels good, I suppose, to be able to say, okay, we can bring something to this conversation and share with peers and be on that journey together. Yeah, and the third, I suppose, interesting thing or good thing for me has been that in Christian Aid, when we submitted the Pledge for Change report, that effort was big. However, then we thought, okay, let's use this information. Let's be more open. Let's be more widely open about our commitment to shifting power. And we wrote then a public version of the report, and we shared that in the public domain, on social media, in humanitarian platforms, development conversations. And that was really well received. And I feel good that, this has really furthered on the conversation in the wider sector. But there have been a few downsides, and I'll just mention them and then I'll wrap up. I hope I'm not going over time, Nancy. You should stop me if I am. But yeah, there's a few downsides, and one of them is finding common ground. The signatories in Pledge for Change are so very, very different, and finding common ground such as was required for the PAM mechanism, took a very long time. And even when we did find the common ground, some organizations, signatories, said they would not adopt all the accountability, including ourselves. You know, everybody said, there's some parts I can't do yet this year. But, you know, everybody would come on stream step by step. But the reality is the slowness of that progress can be frustrating. A second challenge was around the metrics that were agreed as indicators. And I've already mentioned this. They were very heavily and strongly influenced by what the Southern-based supporters wanted to know. And that is sometimes not what we wanted to know, nor what we could tell. We didn't have the means to get the information to measure progress on things that we up to now had not seen as important. So there's that process of saying, okay, let's be, you know, let's let ourselves be held to account. But then we have to invest. We have to invest in our systems. We have to change our systems. We have to measure different things. It's not easy. There is resistance. Changing systems also often also requires funding, budget. Yeah, not, you know, you have to kind of commit beyond what you thought you would in the beginning. And I suppose maybe the last thing I might mention is the biggest challenge in the mutual accountability process. In fact, it has been evidenced in the discourse analysis that was done as part of the PAM. Christian Aid's MEL team collaborated with Adesso and kind of offered that time to analyze minutes of all the meetings and retreats that were held between 2021 and 24 to see how the topics, the words, the whole conversation changed over time. This is a kind of a way of seeing to what extent the culture changes in the whole process. And it did become clear when you look back over the whole kind of time where this has been discussed, you can see how the original ambitions of the pledge were tempered with a dose of realism, where original ideas were ambitious, reality stepped in, and what the signatories have now committed to being held accountable on is maybe more like low-hanging fruit or a compromise, maybe. You know, you have to be honest and say it's very, you know, there are very difficult things we're talking about here, and bringing everyone along is not that easy, especially when you're very ambitious, which we were. Maybe we'll get back to that place. Maybe.
Thank you.
So yeah, so that's it from me. Organizationally, one last thing to say is this conversation has been so central to our organization that it has really influenced our strategic direction. We are seriously reconsidering our organizational structure, our global presence. We may well, you know, change how we work with partners quite significantly because of this conversation. It's really important to us.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm really happy. Yes, there are downsides, and it's also difficult to bring everybody along to find a common grounds, looking at the different scope of signatories that committed to this. But still going through the process and being able to still see that your partnership process is changing because of this intervention is something that we are excited to hear. So I would like to move to Mike and also get from his perspective from the work that he does around promoting and encouraging risk conversations around risks. So Mike, can you share from your perspective the moment you are in when you talk about risks and the conversations that you've started? What is the situation and how can you share, what will you share with us?
Yeah, so I am going to share mostly from my experience in doing a grants facility, which we did in partnership with amazing organizations, Global Giving, Global Fund for Community Foundations, and Nonprofit Finance Fund. So this initiative was really important to us because it also sort of changed the way our organization looks at partnership, looks at projects. We don't even call our projects like projects anymore because we don't want the partnership to be definite. Like it doesn't need to stop when the project is gone because that is the thing that always happens, right? So what we did was really partnering, really developing and building trust and relationships with partners. And so that actually was the start of looking at trust building activities with partners. Not that we were not doing it before, but now we're very conscious about building trust with partners, as opposed to like asking them for documents as if we don't trust them, and really making them comply to things and to submit documents as if they are not legitimate. They are legitimate. These organizations, people's organizations, are doing the work for years and years, volunteering, dedicating their time, but they just didn't have, they didn't take time to maybe register in their own locality because they didn't have finances. They were busy doing groundwork, community organizing, because that's how you build power within communities, right? So what we did with Abot Kamay Community Solidarity Fund was we made them legitimate. And that is, that could be the perspective from the local organizations, is that INGOs see it as maybe, financial, managing financial risks. But for them, it's actually about being legitimate. And once we did that, once we funded and once we pushed them to do that, they're thankful that they did it, because now, until now, they are able to partner with different organizations, different state actors, different civil society organizations that have enough resources so that they could still do the things that matter to them, even months and years after we closed the funding period. So it started with conversations. We didn't start with heavy due diligence, as is the tradition with partnership with donors. So this was really interesting for us because, so we actually build relationship here. This is not transactional, right? It's like we start with what your organization really wants to do, and then we go from there. We would like to be in the same boat with you. We are going to journey with you, and that was the entire sentiments of the partners that we had from the beginning. They didn't want to be put in a box. They didn't want to see the world from the framework of colonies, because we also studied our own culture, Filipino culture. What matters to Filipinos? What matters to our communities? Because most of the time, development work takes, the perspective of different partners that we deal with, right? So they introduce frameworks, they introduce how things should be done, they introduce theories of change. But then we forget that what actually matters to us is community, our relationship to each other. And those things are easily forgotten, and they do not sort of get to the reports. They do not financially become part of the investments that are poured into projects or initiatives, just because we look at the funds that are being provided by external donors, when in fact, those money is just money or numbers without the efforts, without the acceptance, without the network, without the community work that local organizations are doing. So from M&E to from proposal to onboarding to monitoring and evaluation, we really made it sure that it was dictated or it came from them. We didn't introduce any sort of framework. We wanted to know what was important to them, and that became their own measure. And we also just focused on the learnings that they have from implementing, because we believe that in order for us to get to point A to point B, which is the change that we want to achieve, we really need to endure. We really need to provide longevity in the way that we support them. And what happens if we do it by projects, 2 years, a year, 3 years? It becomes dependency, a culture of dependency. They just become dependent on external donors, which of course INGOs may be the thing that they want is that dependency, so that they too could report and the cycle continues, right? But we're now also learning that if we cut that dependency and we actually empower them to have, a negotiating power, that they have also sort of their own terms of development, what development means to them, what change is important to them, not the agenda of external actors, then we are decolonizing aid. Then we are actually helping Global South actors in the ground. So it was important for us to have that those indicators that matter to them. It was important for us that the actions were proposed by them. We didn't really introduce any, agenda. This is just about going to be blah blah blah. No, whatever actions they propose that they think are helpful in promoting change, development in their own local communities. That's what we went for. And I'm happy to report that until now, those organizations, we still work with them. We still communicate with them. In fact, here, right now, in this venue, we gathered most of the participants or organizations, and we also enjoined other networks or organizations that we work with, and we enjoined them together to talk about much larger change and much larger movement. And there's beauty in that, I think. And this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't had the chance to sit and think and experience what was impossible. So the Global Giving, the Global Fund for Community Foundations, they were pivotal in this partnership because we realized, forget about theory of change. We're gonna focus on how we are going to sustain change, and we're doing it. In the reports that we're doing, we're actually putting figures and numbers to those community assets that are being contributed by community people, and all those culture that we have, our Kapwa-based culture, the way that we relate to each other, the things that matter to Filipinos, those were the measures of success that are found in their reports. The learnings were there because we believe that if you don't learn, how do you change? How can you change if you don't learn? So that was important in the reports that we also asked them to submit, that they, whatever learnings, whatever failures, whatever successes they have, they report it to us so that we learn from it. And and also, equitable partnerships mean that there is a specific role being done by Global Giving. There is a role being done by us as NGO, and then we actually just support the local actors. We actually just provide all the things that they need. So monitoring visits now become not like a very strict or very rigorous formal process where they will be asked if they're doing the things that they said they were going to do. But it was actually conversation. It was also a visit to see how they are doing with the strategy that they're doing, and see if it actually we actually help them think about how to re-strategize if it's not working, and to channel other resources outside of the fund that we provided. So things like that. Those are really the things that we learned about equitable partnership, is seeing them as partner, not some organization with whom we had an agreement with in paper, but with whom we just needed something to happen, numbers maybe, or maybe just reports. It's more than that, because we are working towards change, and whatever that means to them, we're going to be at the sideline, behind them, and making them the front and center of the development that they want to achieve.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And it's true. I totally agree with what you've just said. the most important thing is making the partners, the communities at the center. And I think it also connects to what Alex was also talking about. Even in designing the mutual accountability system, it was all about what do they want to know, not necessarily what the signatories want to know. So I have one last question, and I think others can also contribute and share from their perspective what they are doing to ensure that we are building relationships, we are building trust, we are ensuring that we are both mutually accountable to each other. What has been some of the challenges you see out there with others trying to replicate this kind of work in their different ways? Why is it difficult for people to move from the static process to building trust and relationship? And maybe when you finish, Kate can quickly come in to also share the struggles that she also encountered trying to bring along signatories to be committed to something like a mutual accountability system. So I don't know if Mike can go first. Yes. So, Mike, I don't know if you can share what has been some of the things you've seen in terms of the difficulties others are experiencing to replicate this.
Yeah, it's still a power issue, right? Who defines those risks? Who are willing to take risks? Who can be trusted? Because as far as we know, in INGOs and other agencies, they just really want to work with organizations that they think have the same systems and structures as those similar to them. So, people who write reports, and have financial systems they have that could actually pass the due diligence. But that is not the reality on the ground. Local organizations, although they have been there for decades, they don't necessarily have these structures. So it's hard maybe to convince them and really make them feel comfortable trusting local organizations. Also maybe language, and who's going to adjust, who's going to actually make sure that local organizations who speak a local language could be within the radar of those funding organizations. It's a lot of things, maybe, but I think if people just maybe let go of control sometimes, it'll be a much better development aid system, because a lot of it is really just control.
Yeah.
What matters to them might not necessarily be the thing that matters to local organizations or local communities. So just consult. Just base your interventions on local capacities. Just adjust your systems to the systems in those organizations and communities. And maybe we could do something and really effect change.
Yeah, just holding on the control thing. Thank you for that. Kate, I don't know whether you can quickly also share from your perspective, what was the struggle to get signatories committed to the mutual accountability system?
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks, Mike and Alex. Really fascinating presentations. I think, Mike, you've just described the problem, which is somehow we have built an international aid system which no longer centers the people experiencing the poverty or crisis that the aid system claims to be responding to. And I think that's the challenge for the signatories, is that they have become part of a system which requires of them a sense of top-down command and control interventions. And so doing something the other way around, bringing in ideas of decolonized accountability and decolonizing monitoring an evaluation in this is really countercultural and really challenging to people, and they really have to think differently about the ways in which they're engaging and whose opinion counts, whose voice is the most important, whose indicator is critical, because we're so used to responding to people with power and resources, if they're donors or international organizations, rather than thinking actually the only people whose perspective really counts is the people whose lives are being changed positively or negatively, in fact or not, as a consequence of these interventions. And I think I saw another question in the chat relating to this about what were some of the things that the Southern partners requested to see in the Palm, and I don't have a good answer to that. I think we've tried to bring in lots of different perspectives to the Palm. We are still struggling with persuading or enabling signatories to share their findings. So the pledges include a commitment to transparent reporting, and yet only 2 of our signatories, Christian Aid, as Alex mentioned, and Care International, have made their reports public so far. Which to me is symptomatic of a malaise in the system that isn't based on trust, and it isn't based on transparency and relationships and sharing, but rather based on anxiety or fear, or the need to prove yourself to be doing best all the time, which really detracts from learning, and therefore, in my opinion, from getting better.
Thank you so much. I think there are a couple of questions in the chat. That's in the chat. There are so many examples and so many ideas that is currently being shared in the chat. So I have this question in the chat for Mike. So Mike, there's a question here that says, have you found in any of the cases that you currently do at CDP and its role in sorry, I think, let me share it again. What is the practical example of shifting accountability and sharing risks more equally? Are you aware of in your organization or in other places? I don't know if you can share other examples from the chat.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna answer it through the chat. The question about
Okay.
our role, and if there had been cases where we were not needed anymore. Absolutely, that's the point of it all, right? We empower them enough so that they take the reins and really lead their way towards development, and that has happened in most of the local communities led by duty bearers or the governments, local governments, primarily as the main focus of those interventions. And they later became this sort of advocates and champions so that other communities with the same situation and contacts would actually follow what they did. And that has been the ripple effect, or like multiplier effect, that has been sort of might I say, the signature, or like the brand of CDP interventions in most communities that we work with.
Thank you. And if you have examples, something similar of what you're doing, you can also share it in the chat, and let's keep on the conversation. Just to also let you know that we'll be staying on for additional 30 minutes to share more, to discuss more after the conversation. So you can stay on to have conversations with Alex, Kate, and Mike to share more about the mutual accountability and the risks work that we are doing. So let me hand over to David for a quick announcement whilst we continue the discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Fascinating conversation. Alex, Mike, Kate, that's wonderful. Please keep examples coming in the chat. Other things that you are aware of, other examples of mutual accountability mechanisms. We know that there are many more out there, and It's just also a great opportunity to share resources and inspiration with each other. While we're doing this, we obviously also want to look at kind of just invite you to join the other sessions that we have today. And the session, this session and the next session is actually very much related. The next session will be about solidarity and partnerships. I think a lot what Mike also was speaking to resonates a lot. For example, with the reversed call for proposals, where no surprise, your colleague May 4th is also involved in, but many more others as well. And we're going to discuss also what equitable partnerships really mean. Everybody's talking about it, but what does it really mean today? And then obviously there's the last session today, the sense-making session. It's posted in the chat. While we're getting there, we also first want to still stay on accountability and risk. Sorry, I'm confusing here our tech partners. These are the next two sessions, but let's actually move to the weather card, if that's possible, Debbie. Thank you so much. So after all what you heard, but also what's coming in on the chat, the question is, when we think about shifting power in relation to accountability and risk, precisely, more specifically, which weather symbol reflects the moment we're in now? In February 2025, consider what's happening in the world, people's energy for change on these specific aspects of accountability and risk sharing. You can just go directly to this whiteboard with your cursor and pick one of the green checks and move it to the weather symbols that for you best represent the moment that we're in. Is it just really sunny weather? Is it sun and rain, which is actually quite positive, good for growth? Is it completely rainbow? Is it a thunderstorm? A tornado, a typhoon? We've got a lot of different weather symbols here. So you can just pick one of the green checks and move it over. And it's interesting to see there are a lot of green checks coming in around, what does that mean? Sunny weather here. I have to see in sunny intervals. That's quite interesting. And overall, this looks not that disastrous, like some of the weather cards that we looked at yesterday when we talked about leadership, and specifically also when we talked about, not surprisingly, the resource flows. You can also add into the chat why you think the current moment that we're in is like this weather, to give a little bit of more language around that. Please feel free to do so as well. Nancy, is there anything that is surprising to you when you look at this weather card? Anything that stands out?
I think I see a mix of sun and rain, and sunny. It's not too cloudy, and I think it's more like it's bright, and hope when it comes to some of this conversation, about that. But there is also some level of drought somewhere, which is also interesting. And you can stay on for the next 30 minutes so that we can explore more where the droughts are, where the challenges are, and then what is the sun, the rain, where are the opportunities? Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Before we move to the kind of the informal conversation, and we all invite all of you to that, maybe we can stop screen sharing, and I would love to bring in Mike and Alex one more time. And I'd love to ask the two of you in a minute, what are your two top key takeaways from this session? What's the message that you want to share with the audience around the moment that we're in, but also kind of the moment that the path that is ahead of us. Your top two takeaways. Let's start with Alex again, and then we'll end with Mike.
Thanks, David. I mean, the two things I suppose that stand out for me, I thought the first one, both Mike and I and Nancy mentioned it, it's the benefits of traveling together. We are talking about mutual accountability. We're talking about working on a par with community-based organizations, other partners that we're working with, holding each other to account, but also inspiring each other and encouraging each other to be brave and to see things that don't yet exist. I think that's really key. The other thing I might also pick up on is Kate mentioned it, and I see it also in the chat. Whose value counts? I know that kind of echoes Robert Chambers from the late 90s. He talked about, you know, who counts, and he was a big proponent of participation. But I think we can just paraphrase that. Whose value count? It's not just about participation, it's about who sets the questions. And I think that's really important for me. Mike reminded me of it, and it's also really a big part of the work in Christian Aid that I do around decolonizing our MEL. So I'm glad it came up.
Thank you. Wonderful, Mike. Over to you.
Yes. So maybe one thing that I've would like for us to also take away from this is with indicators and measuring MEL, AMEL, meals, all those terms that talk about measuring. We need to measure what matters to communities, and sometimes those do not have a predefined lens of how to see things. We just need to maybe look at the changes that are happening and then make sense of it, as opposed to readily having this lens and then looking at it as though confirming it that it's happening because of that. What about subjectivity? What about local context? What about local practice and culture that contributed to that? You're going to lose sight of those. So I really just want to make sure that people respect subjectivity when we talk about development and change. So it also must appear in the way that we measure it and the way that we see changes in these communities. And another thing is maybe what with all the happening with Trump and Elon Musk and USAID, maybe it's also time to look at local giving or like local philanthropy, community philanthropy, and maybe the development aid system should be supportive of that, not like in contradiction to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the two of you. Everybody's going to have the chance to hear from Kate one more time in the next session, so I'm not going to call on you now. But we're basically transitioning now into the informal part of the session. Nancy and Jenny are going to host you so whoever wants to stay for another 25, 30 minutes in plenary, in breakout sessions, depending on your appetite, please do so. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining. Please remember to join the next sessions.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks to everybody.